In this lesson, we're going to discuss what are scholarly sources and contrast that with what are not scholarly sources. So what exactly are scholarly sources? These are also called academic or peer-reviewed sources. They are typically written by university faculty, researchers, or scholars. They typically use the technical language that is used in the field. They include full citations for sources used in the article and provide a reference list at the end. Lastly, they tend to be longer and more in-depth. You may wonder, what does the term peer-reviewed mean? Typically, when something is peer-reviewed, it is reviewed by other experts in the field. These people are tasked with evaluating the quality of the article. They'll check it for accuracy and will assess the research method and procedures if described in the article. They're looking to determine the validity of the article and the rigor with which it was researched and written. If validity and rigor are lacking, then the article will get rejected and won't get published. If validity and rigor are present in the article, then it will be accepted and get published. If the article is inadequate, the reviewers can require that the author revise the article. If the revisions are acceptable, then the article will get published. Why, you ask, do you need to use scholarly sources? Well, scholarly sources provide authority and credibility to your academic writing. Academic writing requires that you document your sources. Where did the facts and ideas and research methods come from that you are using to make a point or formulate a conclusion? That way, readers can check your sources, go back to the originals, read them, and determine the quality of the evidence and whether to accept your ideas and conclusions. Typically, scholarly sources will also be more dispassionate and balanced. They will identify and discuss alternative explanations and viewpoints. This is meant to eliminate bias. Would you be able to recognize a scholarly source when you saw one? Here are the covers for some scholarly sources. You can see they do not pique your interest like a popular magazine. They typically just provide the title and a listing of the articles. So examples would include the Accounting Review, the Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science, the Annals of Finance, and the Academy of Management Journal. There are hundreds and hundreds of other examples. In contrast, popular sources are not scholarly sources. Popular sources are written for the general public. Popular sources use language that would be understood by the general public, often written at an 8th grade level. Popular sources rarely give citations for the sources they use in the article, and popular sources typically tend to be shorter than scholarly articles. Now let's take a look at the covers of some popular sources. They're quite different than the scholarly source covers. Therefore, U.S. News & World Report, Business Week, Forbes, and Times are not scholarly sources. They are written for a general audience. Let's review the difference between scholarly and popular sources. Scholarly sources are written for members of the field by scholars in that field, and popular sources are written for the general public. Scholarly sources are peer-reviewed, and popular sources are not. Scholarly sources use technical language used in the field, and popular sources use language that could be understood by the general public. Scholarly sources include full citations for the sources used in the article, and popular sources rarely provide full citations. Scholarly sources tend to be longer and more in-depth articles, and popular sources tend to be shorter. So how can you tell if something is scholarly or not? Well, first, who publishes it? Is it peer-reviewed? Typically, a scholarly association, university presses, or recognized academic publishers are safe bets to be scholarly. After a while, you'll recognize some academic publishers. For example, Springer is a well-known academic publisher of journal articles. Routledge is another well-known academic publisher of scholarly books and journals. When in doubt, you can check the journal and determine if there is a peer review process. Let's say we are unsure about the Annals of Finance Journal. We can look under the editorial procedure and see that they use reviewers and referees. Therefore, this would be a scholarly source. Please note that if you're using your university library online, you can typically limit your searches to scholarly, peer-reviewed journals by clicking the box you see at the bottom left. Another clue to determine if a source is scholarly or not would be to see how frequently it's published. Scholarly sources are not published that frequently, maybe 4 times a year or so. In contrast, popular sources are often published daily, weekly, or monthly. Today we have a multitude of resources that can be found on the internet. However, you must use caution when using these resources. Few are scholarly. You're certainly safe if you're using a scholarly journal that publishes a web version, but most other sources on the internet are not scholarly. An example would be Wikipedia, which is not a scholarly source. It is community edited, but that community is not always people who have studied in the area or are scholars. Remember that the scholarly sources are written for members of the field by scholars in that field, are peer-reviewed, use the technical language of the field, include full citations for sources, and are also longer and more in-depth. Well, I hope you enjoyed the presentation and learned about scholarly sources. Thanks for listening.